This is Siddharth Alwalia. Welcome to the 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Sripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category creating tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education, such as EasyTap, MyGate, and SignUp. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in. Today I have with me Sanjay Nath, managing partner, Blume Ventures. Sanjay, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Siddhartha. We're doing it by Zoom this time, but look forward to connecting in person soon once the situation settles.
Absolutely, Sanjay. Sanjay, we love to know more about your journey, how you started Bloom before we dive into the current scenario which is prevailing today.
Sure, Siddhartha. So I will, I'll try and share my brief journey, right from the beginning. I'm a Bombay boy. Uh, grew up here in Bombay. Of course, now we're all stuck in our home cities wherever we are. I decided to do engineering, went to BITS Pilani, and then my path took me to the US. And I hadn't planned to set out and become a venture capitalist, a VC. We see so many different paths, right, that take us to wherever we've landed up. I started in product marketing with Sun, and then moved over to PwC strategy consulting, and PwC was then acquired by IBM, and became a member of the Mumbai Angels, which is when I, got my first exposure into angel investing and to venture capital. So, different journeys, different paths, same destination. I know you've already covered my co-founder Karthik, and incidentally, that's where I met Karthik at the Mumbai Angels, where we were both investing on behalf of family offices and on our employers, and we just connected. So for me, just on this question, I think what got me interested into venture capital was just connecting with people, connecting with founders, and hearing hearing some very interesting people who want to go out and change the world and are very obsessively, pathologically, really care about a problem that's close to their heart. And after being a CXO and CXO, I just thought it would be very interesting to be on the other side, to not necessarily starting companies, but basically to co-found a VC to back such startups, to follow their dreams. So that was the journey. And interestingly, even though I was in the valley for a long time, I was actually not a venture capitalist there. My entree into venture capital actually happened through the Mumbai Angels. So it's interesting that venture capital actually brought me, the pool of India brought me back into the world of venture capital, and we started Bloom.
So 2020, I believe, marks the 10 years of Bloom.
Actually, 2000, you're right. We technically started in 2010, but next year, 2021, will be our 10th year of Bloom Day, in the sense that if you look at formally, it was like 2011, but the birth and genesis started in 2010. That's right.
So it was 2011 when you made your first investment from Bloom Fund.
That's right.
I
No,
think then
we well. First close happened in 2010 December. But if you think of the formal, the formal launch of Bloom, it is really 2011.
Sanjay, you backed InMobi in 2008 when we had a similar downturn as the current one. We don't know like how COVID-19 will turn out, but definitely the economic impacts we are seeing it right here right now. And looking back retrospectively, you have seen Y2K, you have seen the 2001 9/11 crisis, like 2008, and currently 2020 COVID. In 2008, when the market was crashing, what made you back Naveen Tiwari?
crisis, but I think the deep thinking, the passion, and the ability to convince initial stakeholders, early employees. You look at the strength of the co-founders, right? I mean, Amit and Mohit, and three IIT Kanpur guys, one rookie guy, who are all had seasoned experience under the belt to all come together, right? That gives you a show of confidence. And remember, I was a small check writer, part of that round. So I think that vision and that the gumption and the passion to go out and make a difference. I think we back that as much as just the idea itself, because all of us know that ideas pivot, right? So yeah, that was one of the first angel investments from the Mumbai Angels, and this is, remember, I was still in San Francisco. I had not made a decision to move back as yet.
Wow. You must be looking at back at 10 years, and have the same confidence that, crisis is the best time to back founders when.
So that, yes and no. I mean, you're right. We are all clouded at the time of crisis, because you look at, like you use the word gloom and doom, and you look at, just, you've got to survive, right? To thrive, you think thrive later, but first you've got to survive. You've got to steady your ship. You've got to clean house. But there are a couple of interesting things. Actually, it is also sometimes a silver lining to do the things and to clean up house. To use that word, things that you should do anyway in good times, right? Like, for example, look at, I mean, we've seen now the SoftBank WeWork fiasco, right?
Yeah.
I was on a webinar the other day, and they said, in good times, how do you test the founder? You tell the founder, okay, it's good, take more capital, burn more capital, go and spend it. You're not really testing anything, right? He has that the surety of the capital with him. In a tough time, you're seeing how you navigate a crisis, right? You have to deal with your investors, your employees, your team, your morale, your own health. In this case, the pandemic itself, right? So it's interesting if you think about the other way, that you actually, in one sense, person's true metal comes out, right? Like, great companies will survive and thrive, and great companies will be created. Uh, but I don't want to obviously overplay the significance of the crisis. I mean, I think our first task, obviously, as investors, is to make sure that your company survive, that they get through this, they get moral support, financial support, all kinds of support. If you think about a VC, Siddharth, it's interesting as you're talking. We are, if you look at the Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, venture capitalists, we put skin in the game, but we don't make a single thing, right? Like, a VC doesn't make anything. We put our brain power and our goodwill and all our intellectual capacity and empathy, right? Our EQ and IQ, to help our founders. We are a collection of all our founders. So what our founders do actually is extremely critical, right, in this crisis. And our job is to basically coach and mentor and be a guide to them. I've just, that realization sinks in every day, that you are a coach and mentor, and in this crisis, it's coming out even more. They need you, and you have to help them.
Absolutely. And the way Bloom is leading its set of portfolio, you have been doing, I think, almost a webinar daily for your portfolio on different aspects on how to best help them.
Yeah, so that we'd love to even open that up to others, to non-Bloom, right? I mean, we're getting a lot of requests, as you also see on Twitter. And it's not that we don't want to do that, but first, you always got to clean up your own shop, take care of your own family, right? As you can well imagine.
Absolutely.
And as you also know, we have a very large family, right? We are not a private equity firm with 10 or 12 investments. I mean, we have more than 75 companies in different sectors, different geographies, different stages of growth, and how they're impacted by this. But it's very interesting also. I mean, see, by nature, VCs are always optimistic, right? In the sense that you are betting on innovation, you want the business, a space to be changed, you're betting on the future, you're betting on the good of people to come up, and you have to look at both sides. I think one interesting thing, I would use the word equalizer, is how the situation has equalized and put all of us on the same level, right? And what I mean by that is, whether you're a CEO of a $1 billion company, or a junior level employee, everybody's working from home, right? Everybody's stuck. Everybody's the same. That's one. Secondly, it's brought, there's a lot of empathy right now, where the reason we're doing these seminars is, I think people are willing to make the time. People see that they have time, and they want to make the time to give back and to share. It's so interesting, right? In good times, we've never done this. I mean, we've never done this with the same frequency and the same flow, correct? I mean, yeah, we're doing almost like one a day, one every 3 days. NASCOM is doing it, TI is doing it, you're doing it, right? There's such fantastic work, the ACT fund that started. It's basically brought people together, right? And it's connected the dots. But I think there's no doubt that the task is to survive this, and we are creating like an internal like survival playbook, if you will, right? Sequoia sent out a framework, with those three cost scenarios, right? And interestingly, they had also done something similar in the 2008 downturn, right? Which is called that spiral, which is basically if you don't cut costs now, it is the only internal variable which we believe in also. It's the only internal variable that you can control is your cost, your runway, your cash, right? You can't control how much your gamer is going to spend, for your game, or the enterprise sales, the buying cycle is going to come back. But what you can control is your team, your morale, and your costs. So our task is basically to get a company out of this strong and then emerge stronger.
So currently, as you said, there are 75 plus Bloom portfolio companies right now.
That's right, more than 75.
How is the impact across the spectrum? For example, like Unacademy is like a demonetization for edtech companies, especially like Unacademy who are the right place, right time, and building on a fiercely till this moment,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
all test prep today has moved online. Whereas you have companies like
that's
in
right.
your portfolio like Milk Basket, Purpule, who are also hit in a different way, right?
That's right.
And how is your SaaS portfolio companies doing right now? Can you share impact across the various categories and spectrum in your portfolio?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, Siddharth. It's not one size fits all, as you yourself are saying. So we've been trying to map it, across different frameworks and like a different matrix. I think there will be some sectors that are just structurally hard hit, right? Just because the structure, for example, and then there are going to be the other side, which are what we'll call lift sectors, right? So they're you either have a tailwind that is lifting you, or you have a headwind that is you have to go into, right? So we'll start with the headwind side, which is the tougher side. So for example, let's say shared mobility, right? If the government shuts down just bikes, everything, right, down, that sector is a little affected, right from Ola to Uber, correct? Like if you look at the US, I was talking to my peers and friends there. Interestingly, lots of Uber drivers have moved to Uber Eats, correct? Because those deliveries are more relevant. Now everybody's working from home. So obviously, even the US Uber and Lyft have been hit. So shared mobility is kind of tough. SaaS is a double-edged sword. Uh, Enterprises will take some time to open their wallets again. For SaaS companies, it's very, very important to keep the existing customers close to them, right? To reduce churn, to make sure your existing customer base stays intact. On the other hand, if you look at deeper tech plays like robotic process automation, RPA, let's say conversational AI, chatbots, anything that's basically autonomous systems. I think those, this is a new world order, right, Siddharth? I think we've entered. I think the era, just the way the corporate HQs are going to be viewed is different. I think people are not necessarily going to feel that you have to be at work Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday, but the future of work is here. So autonomous systems will drive, a lot of the growth, and I think enterprises will start picking them up. Now, moving to EdTech, you talked about Unacademy. I think Unacademy, Touchwood, finds itself in a very favorable situation because EdTech was already moving online, right? I mean, Byju's as a hybrid, Unacademy was always only online, is one area where Indians, and we definitely don't want to suffer, right? I mean, I'll give you an example. My son, he's a teenager. He's been on virtual school now for the last 2-3 weeks, just like we've been working from home. And I'm sure you have a lot of friends and peers who have kids, and it's all moved to the virtual classroom. So for Unacademy, it's been a boom. I think productivity tools, future of work, ed tech, in one sense are going to be strong. Anything retail is tough, right? I'm sure you cover that. If you think about everybody from our beloved, all our favorite coffees and all our restaurants are all shut. They're moving to delivery. They're trying to innovative things. So uh, I think what I would suggest to founders is that if you're in a lift sector, which is positively structurally favorable, then you want to dominate, win market share, keep customers with you. If you're on the other hand in a tougher sector, then you want to first thing you want to do is you cut costs and lengthen your runway, and then keep your existing customers close, and then use marketing at this time to come up with some innovative, creative marketing campaigns where you can win over new customers and new users once the situation starts to unfold. So you brought up a good question. This is not one size fits all. I think all founders and entrepreneurs have to go back to the existing businesses and really strategize and think about what does it mean for them. It's not a one size fits all formula.
So you talked about future of work. So can you share about the portfolio companies in Bloom who are working on future of work?
Sure. I mean, TapChief is one, Frap is the other. I cover TapChief, a little more. So I'll share a bit about TapChief, and also I'll just share my macro about future of work. See, I like to say that the future of work is already in the present, right? The future is already here. It's not the future anymore. Multiple things have happened. I don't know if you saw the stats. Zoom was apparently on 10 million MAUs, right? For some time, and it's in this crisis, it's gone up, Siddharth, to 200,
Yes,
right?
it's
I
almost
mean,
equal
and
to Snapchat.
I'm not. In fact, I'm not surprised. In fact, yesterday I had a couple of calls, and the person just called directly, and I'm like, why are you calling me? Right? Don't you have Zoom? And then he just realized that we're letting Zoom take over our lives, right? That Zoom has just become the default, or any productivity tool. So that was one big macro factor. I think the fact is that everything from reducing air pollution, environmental pollution, to reducing congestion on the roads. The corporation is really thinking that what tasks really have to be face to face in office, and what can be done remotely, right? That's a macro. I think this situation has only exacerbated that and accelerated that. And I think the future of work, I think, will be here sooner than later, right? In terms of, if you look at the corporation of today, think of this like a Harvard Business School, HBR review, Harvard Business Review. We all like look at a company like our own Gray Orange Robotics, right? Globally distributed model. Founders are in the US, R&D centers in Germany and in Boston. The base is in Gurgaon. R&D is also in Singapore. We've heard about all this, and I think this already the future of work. So productivity tools, WhatsApp, Slack. I mean, Siddharth, think about the apps that are available to us today, which were even there 5 years ago, right? You just had WebEx for telecom, and then you had Salesforce for CRM. Today you have Notion, Affinity. I'm sure I'm forgetting some names, and Zoom, and so many more that people use. So moving on to TapChief, what TapChief is? It's a two-sided marketplace, right? I mean, basically, for the gig economy, it is that workspace and platform that lets freelancers manage their work, that gets access to gigs. And on the corporate side, if people don't want to hire full time, it gives them access on a real-time basis to really good skills in tech, design, and marketing, right? There are other models also in the US. That's one example. Frap is doing some, similar. It's focused more on students, right? Uh, so I think the future of work is already here, like I like to say, and it will work in tandem with productivity tools. Also, education, right? I mean, look at Lambda School, Siddharth. It all sort of ties in together. Earlier, I'll say this earlier. When Karthik and I, let's say, we planned our career trajectories. You do engineering, then you go to the US to business school. You'll work for 10 years. Then you may start a startup, or you might become a VC, right? Today, if you look at most of the kids, they're parallel processing. That's a word I think that's important. I don't know if grad school is the importance of that is going to reduce. Maybe it might. Lambda school, look at all these kind of testing formats, right? Shared, like shared homeschooling. I mean, think about this. Homeschooling is such a new concept. What if you have like pooled homeschooling or shared homeschooling? I think there are going to be a lot of models which future of work also comes in earlier and touches even education, before we graduate. So it's all related.
And how is the impact across, of the COVID-19 situation across the companies you share, Tap Chief and Frap? Are there more gig workers available today, or the companies are looking to outsource some of the fixed workforce to
Yeah.
gig workers?
I think on the supply side, which is the supply or the number of gig workers, I think will definitely go up. In terms of you look at a state like Goa, for example, right? So that if you look at lots of the best designers and good designed work, for example, is saying that I don't need to be in front of the corporation. I meet them my clients maybe once in 2 weeks or once a week. I can be anywhere. I know Goa has attracted a lot of these people. Delivery, for example, I don't know if you know, but the CEO Sahil of Delivery sits in Goa. He's moved to Goa. Can you imagine a unicorn company being based and operated out of Goa, right? So the reason I mentioned that example is that the supply has increased. I think what has to come back is the demand side, right? How are corporations going to open their wallets again? Is this discretionary, non-discretionary spending? I think right now the focus right across is on discretionary, right? Renegotiate your leases, cut all your non-discretionary costs of Azure to Amazon, AWS, right? Bills. Look at it. You need the expensive office. So I think on the demand side, corporations and even startups will take a hard look. But there's no doubt, I think, on the supply side that the supply of gig workers will increase.
And in 2020, like when you began 2020, Bloom works as a thesis across all, the partners, the team members. So has there been a change in thesis of investments, what we are going to do in 2020?
So I'll answer the question in two ways. I think for Bloom 3, we have become far more thesis driven. So I'll go back to the evolution so that if you look at it, we started like a micro VC or what is called like a super angel fund, right, in 2010-11. Then we moved to a more classic pre-A VC when we were cutting like $500,000 checks, about 3 crores, in Fund 2, which is 2016. In Fund 3, which is today, which is the $100 million fund, we are still pre-A, but today we're doing upwards, 1 million minus, but also going up to 1.5, even to 2 in some cases. We have become far more thesis driven, and I'll explain what that means. See, earlier we were looking at things like, okay, we will break it up into sectors. We will look at consumer internet B2C. We'll look at enterprise, right, built in Bangalore for the world, global markets, and we look at SMB, right, Kirana shops and things like that, more sector. Now we actually gone even deeper and saying that, okay, we will look at even deep tech. Now in deep tech, what's happening in drones, right? So we have a thesis around drones. We have a thesis around space tech. We have a thesis on the other side around agri-tech, right? Even in fintech, what is going to happen in lending, in investments, in distribution, right? For example. So we've become much sharper and we have even sub-thesis. And we've also organized a team by that, Siddharth. So, right from the partner level to the principals, to the analysts and associates, we are all mapped broadly to sectors and we have some overlaps. I think you have to be, because India is now becoming, not only do we have 1.3 billion people, but you've got geofication, you have, a huge middle class, you've got technology in hands of tier 1, tier 2, but also India 2, India 3.3 in Bharat. So you can't be one size fits all. That the era of the generalist VC is over. So we have become much more thesis and investment thesis driven.
And you specifically, from the beginning, have focused a lot on B2B and SaaS. You shared briefly in the podcast till now that SaaS is going to be impacted. A lot of renegotiation is going to happen with the existing clients. But what are you thinking? What is 2020, 2021 now going to look for SaaS companies?
Yeah. I will broaden SaaS to also include broad enterprise, right? So I'll include SaaS in that. I will include enterprise software in that. I'll also include deep tech in that, right? Let's say non-consumer, right? Broadly. So I think on the tough side, like I mentioned, uh, till enterprises come back fully and open their wallets again, I think lending runways and maintaining your existing accounts, reducing churn is very important, right? No matter what you do, whether it is classic enterprise software, you're selling, $100,000 accounts, or $20 a month SaaS, you've got to keep your existing customers, right? That's first and foremost very, very important. On the other hand, Siddharth, I actually think that this is going to be one of the most exciting and important sectors, because if you look at, like I call the new world order, with future of work and with, I won't say less human contact, but more selective human intervention and contact, right? We don't need humans for every task, and with the move towards automation, I think the rise of autonomous systems, right, of technology is going to increase. In one sense, you could say that gray orange robotics ahead of its time. You look at UiPath. You look at in the US also, on the stock markets, there's been a lot of success, a lot of IPOs from these SaaS companies, Datadog, Slack, Zoom, right? You know all these names. what investors also look at and saying is that, if they play their cards well, this can be an annuity business that is growing quarter on quarter, year on year. It is predictable. It's almost like, in one sense, like a public market business, right? Because if you have a stable, if you have good technology that is being used by customers day in, day out, then the switching costs are also higher, right? You can build annuity contracts, you can sign 3-year contracts. So I think overall, actually, the outlook for SaaS and tech, I think, actually is very bullish in my view. I think in the short term, they have to survive to make sure that. So this is an important point. I will say that focus as much on receivables versus just order books and purchase orders, right? Because you may have a great pipeline, and your receivables may look quite strong, but are you collecting it fast enough? Are the 30 days becoming 90 days? Are collections and receivables, the focus will become important.
And uh, from investment point of view, so is Bloom spending a still majority of the time, let's say 30-40% looking at new deals, or the focus is completely for the next 1-2 months on the existing portfolio?
I think it's first most important to get your house in order, right? As VCs and even as startup CEOs. So do all your enough. Are your what is the assessing the business impact, right? We talked about the tailwind and headwinds factor. Are they adequately capitalized? Are they in denial mode? Do they really know what's going to hit them? Also, what do you want to plan now is not just for 3 months, right? It has to go go across the next 12 months to 24 months to the next 5 years. So first is assessing their impact. So to answer your question, yes, most a large percent of the focus will make sure that that your best companies are protected, that they have enough capital, and they are conserving cash and extending runway. That's number one. Now, number two, to your side, see, we have already quite an active backlog, right? I mean, from last year, we built that brand. We have great companies approaching us. In one sense, it is an investor's market, right? As you can imagine. I don't think people are rushing. I don't think anybody is rushing into deals. Have we stopped evaluating? No, of course not. Are we running to to plan an IC for Monday? Of course not either. But I think there are good opportunities. There will be a lot of good talent actually floating around. One of the things, Siddharth, that will happen is I see also a wave of consolidations and mergers, M&A, right? More the M side than the A side. Consolidation doesn't necessarily mean distress. I mean, good companies banding together, right? Which means there'll be a lot of talent available. Some of the talent will be available to join your startups. Some of them may be starting new companies. So I think of course, we are open for business, okay, to use that word, but we are not necessarily rushing. I think we will all go at a more measured pace.
That means that a few Monday IC meetings will be skipped, right?
Yeah,
And more focused
no, no.
on.
I'll tell you. IC meetings are for everything. IC meetings are even for when the company is raised in the next round, right? You have IC for that also, right? So, for example, ICs could be should this company merge with another company, right? Should we acquire another asset? You have an IC for that also. I'm saying that earlier the investment decision was more a term sheet. Let's invest. I
Yes.
think now you're looking at multiple things. That you're almost like operating like a business. Okay, you shut down one business, you put more resources in another. Should you merge? Should you acquire? Should you get the gist, right? I think you're looking
Yes.
much more broadly and holistically.
And would it also affect your reallocation of capital? Because as you mentioned, so your focus would be to make sure that the best companies survive uh, this gloom period.
You're right. The best companies should be the best companies are the ones who are always the most self-sufficient, right? You never want to be dependent. I mean, you may be lucky to have a well-heeled PC backing you, or may have raised huge rounds. You have just have the cash in your bank, which is a good position to be in. You shouldn't necessarily spend it. But we like the best companies to be self-sufficient, right? Does it affect our reallocation strategy? I think we will obviously want to make sure we conserve cash for the best companies, but you also want to encourage these startups to think in a self-sufficient way themselves, right? And not be dependent on that. See, again, I'm coming back to that SoftBank WeWork example. I know it's only one example and overused, but the fact is that what it was also creating was that endless supply of capital, right? Okay, you've got a big daddy that you can go to, and you keep using it. Or I think now VCs will ask the question very, hey, listen, what do you really need this money for, right? Okay, here's 5 million because we can't. Earlier it was like, okay, we can't deploy less than 3 million because that's a minimum check size. So let's take it, park the money, and you can put it in FD. I think now very carefully, what do you really need the capital for? Is the business plan ready to absorb it? Do you want to try? Let's tranche the money. I think in one sense, Siddharth, this is actually going to enforce a lot of good behavior, which people, if you think about a panel, if you were doing this, let's say we were doing this podcast 3 months ago, a lot of questions I'd imagine would be around, okay, let's talk about what's happening with WeWork and SoftBank. Is there too much capital in the business? Part two, profitability. Are entrepreneurs thinking, are VCs thinking about part two? I feel actually, if you think about it, the situation is a great time to come back to those first principles, which should be the case anyway, right?
Absolutely. So can you share a few examples within your portfolio where the companies are cutting cost in the most elegant manner, and where you are sharing, hey, this is the playbook which you should be following to other companies, and if possible.
I won't divulge names, but that's a great question, and it's very appropriate and important for these times also. So I'll give you a couple of ranges. So some of our portfolio companies have taken that framework, right, that we've seen shared by Sequoia and the others, which is a good one, which is three scenarios across, and we are also developing our own. We're just coming up with our own framework and a matrix also that we'll roll out to our founders. But basically, a couple of approaches I'll share. Let's talk about hiring, and I mean, let's talk about team, right? So that's the most difficult always. Do you? So let's say you and I co-founders and we're talking, right? Okay, hey, what should we do? Should we do pay cuts or should we do layoffs? Okay. So uh, uh, one approach for pay cuts is to do it right across, right? You could do it proportionately, right? Obviously, the people who are, let's say, in the lower bracket of pay, you don't want to cut them because that will cut into the bone. Nah? You don't want to cut into muscle. You only want to cut into fat. And then let's say the founders take a higher proportion of the salary cut, right? Because leadership should start from the top. The other is that you cut your bottom performers, which you should be cutting anyway, and maybe do a marginal cut on the others, right across the board. So some of the founders are doing that. Interesting. Another interesting strategy is that if you're really young and it's been too soon to tell who is top performer and not top performer, you can even defer, right? You can defer part of the salary. We'll take 60% of as is, and 40% is going to be deferred, right? Which is there still in the pot. But once we meet our milestones and there's a full recovery expected, to take that, which is actually good skin in the game, right? Because morale is also high. People know that that pot is still there. It's just that you're not taking it up front. So this is on the team side, on the sort of the hiring freeze and the pay cuts versus the sort of layoff side. But sometimes, you have to make some hard calls. And I think, Siddharth, it is more important. So I'll say this. I think it's very important to communicate with clarity and consistency and why you're doing it. And leadership starts from the top. If you have a founder, we've seen some founders do this very well, who start from the top and give a good, very objective, fact-based analysis, right? For example, structurally, the government is shut down. Let's say our business, we can't operate. Our warehouses are closed. Our shops are closed. The online, we have to deal with agents and other people in the field. Our field sales is all shut. Okay, so we have to make some tough decisions. So from the top, I am taking a 50% salary cut, right? As we go down, we're going to proportional to that. Like, L1s, L1, 2 are going to be 30, 20%. And to the line employees, it's going to be like 5 and 10%, right? I think when employees see that the founder and the CEO and the CXOs are leading from the top and they're part with them, they're more likely to be engaged, right? Versus saying, Acha, I'm okay, you're on the other side of the fence and I'm cutting you. So I think this is also a time to build empathy and to show that you care, and show that the only way to show that you care is that show that you're part of the whole thing as far as money is also concerned.
And you have backed some of the very resilient founders, and you have seen, great exits. For example, uh, Metal acquired by Mercer, Minjar Cloud acquired by Nutanix, Taxi for Sure acquired by Ola, and now Floats acquired by Geo. So these are some of the companies which had faced valley of death at one or two many times in their lifetime, and you were
Right.
there along with them. What are your learnings from these founders when these guys faced valley of deaths, but still, they have a very successful exit at the end of it?
Yeah, see, success is all relative. But it's interesting. See, this actually, this crisis, I use this word equalizer. It actually brings in this moniker, the term of marriage and partnership even more, right? People say, oh, we're smart capital and we are two partners. We are entrepreneurs who back entrepreneurs. But when there's a crisis, you see that coming through. So basically, what the CEO's job is very lonely, right? Think about it. No, who can criticize the CEO? Only the board and investors, right? Or maybe the co-founders. No junior employees technically can because they may be fear of reprisals. So what they really need is the FPG, right? The friend, philosopher, guide, a shoulder to cry on, a sounding board, and you have to be there. This could be from specific M&A agreements and questions and term sheets to things like uh, uh, you know um, how should our co-founders divide up our roles? So I'm just feeling depressed right now. They just need somebody to talk to, right? So we've always been there with them. You've been there with them in good and worse, but obviously in tough times you need them even more. Which is where, Siddharth, again, all these yoga and meditation sessions and learning from leaders who've also been through crisis and learning from their mistakes is becoming important. The support structure, right? I'd use that word. I think what people appreciate is the support structure where people say, "Oh, I'm not the only one going through this." Not only are all Blume founders going through it, are all founders going through it, but here is a superb leader. Like between us, we got Aditya Ghosh, right, to come and talk, and he was fantastic, right? He was just superb. Now, when you have a caliber of that person coming and talking about mistakes they made or crisis they've gone through, then you realize, wow, I mean, if they've gone through this, I can certainly do it. So I think our job is to be a facilitator, enabler, and create those support structures and support systems. Infrastructure in one will in a human infrastructure, where to give them that support. The founders.
So it's said that many are predicting that 2020 will wipe out approximately 20% of the startups, and another
Hmm.
15-20% would have to, as you said earlier in the podcast, have to explore merger or acquisition.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
how are you approaching this playbook for the founders who are listening, who might have had just the runway for the next 6-9 months for a merger and acquisition where there is no haircut involved?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. It's a tough one, and I won't disagree with the stats broadly. So, see, the first thing is you have to take some painful decisions now. Operate lean and mean, cut the flab, and cut costs. Right. So everybody has to do that. Whether you have 100 mil, whether you have, if you have 100 mil in the bank, you don't cut costs, but you don't burn the cash. Right. You don't use the cash as fast. So that you have to do. Um, uh, I think mergers and acquisitions will be of different types, right? So from the bottom side, there will be, for example, if there are layoffs, there will be a lot of talent outside. So, but we have the Constellation platform, right? Passion Connect,
Yes.
which sits in the Constellation, which Sanam runs. And I think we also have a separate like a acqui-hire practice. There's going to be a lot of talent on the streets now, the good talent, right? Well, either from layoffs or from pay cuts or for whatever reasons, the entire company is going down. Where can you absorb the talent? Can your founders absorb that? Can you help, right? Because there's going to be good talent, number one. Then there are acqui-hires, right? So I would suggest that the companies that if you have about 3 to 6 months in cash and you see the writing on the wall, then maybe enter into discussions with other like-minded partners, where you can be absorbed or you can partner. That's the acqui-hire, right? Then you have true consolidation, right, which is more merger of equals, where you can have bankers, because there's real value that will be created. So there you'll have help, and of course, I mean, then you have M&A, right, for the better companies. Um, I would say that faster the decisions made, the better, because you know that in any M&A, when you're close, you have 1 month cash in the bank, then it becomes distressed, right? The other person can squeeze you. So I think it's a good time to start thinking about strategic partnerships, alliances, to tide over this and survive. I think right now the task is about, there are two categories, right? There are the well-funded companies, which is more about, okay, how do you grab market share? How do you emerge strong and win from this? And then the ones who are not so fortunate, it is about just survival, right? So the only way you can survive now is you cut your costs, you bring the dependency back to you, right? Versus keeping on some receivables will be miraculously collected in 30 days. So you have to cut costs and just survive.
So insights here by Bloom founders or the team on what can be the best case scenario coming out of 2020?
Shared by Bloom founders, you see.
Yeah, Bloom founders or within the portfolio or even the Bloom team. What can
Yeah,
be the
yeah,
best case
yeah, yeah.
scenarios? Because we are all preparing for the worst
Sure.
case scenarios. We haven't discussed
Yeah,
yeah, what can be the best case
yeah,
scenarios
yeah.
coming out of 2020.
The best case scenario is, see, this is a difficult question to answer, because unlike all the crises before, prior, Siddhartha, right from Y2K, 9/11, the financial crisis, none of them involved a pandemic, right? SARS was very limited to China. Now, the reason I mentioned that is that the concept of business is basically going and talking to customers, right? Here now you're all limited mobility, so everybody's working off Zoom, and that's basically created a lot of inefficiencies in the whole supply chain, right? I mean, travel has come to a standstill. So if you look at the best case scenario, obviously it is that you have a quicker recovery. Countries stabilize, international flights start, goods can start moving again. Let's say we're talking about the summer, right? June, July. Obviously, the worst cases that goes on to the cell pockets of isolation go on to the pocket to the end of the year. So I think it really depends which sector you're on, whether it's a headwind or tailwind. I mean, what will people do more? Like, just think. I mean, again, I think on the enterprise side, the movement to the cloud has already happened. It's already taking place, correct? Infrastructure, everything moving to the cloud, autonomous systems, future of work, productivity tools. All that is going to have AI, ML. I think it's going to happen more and more. On the consumer side, I think online, digital only online, right? So edtech, as far as fintech is concerned, it's going to take a bit of hit because people will tighten their wallets a bit, but yet they will need more tools and technology, so that will be good. Things like agri-tech, again, interesting sectors, but again, will be depend on mobility and mobility of goods. So to answer your question, best case, I mean, it's really a guess. I think literally we tell founders, you plan for the worst case, have enough cash in the bank, and then you blow past you focus on your business, and you try and make the best case happen, right? You can't plan for the best case. We're all praying and hoping for a best case, but you can't really plan for that. But my sense is that it's going to be somewhere like 6 months. If they're saying, international flights resume in a couple of months. To me, fall is, the June to September period would be, according to me, like re-stabilization, and then hopefully the last quarter is a good one.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast, and thank you for sharing your experience,
Thank you.
insights.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to say one thing. I want to just end on by saying one thing. I think, this crisis has really brought people together, all of us together. And I think that maintaining a positive attitude and a mindset is super important. And the fact that you're doing podcasts like this, and there are webinars, is probably the biggest thing that we can do. I mean, I think our role has shifted from investors and financiers to more listeners, mentors, coaches, helpers, facilitators, to help our founders come out of this, right? Even this podcast that you're doing, I think it's a great service, because we're basically facilitating and discussing the very points that are going to hit home to our founders. So I think it's fantastic to all the facilitators who are doing this, because in good times, do you need it? Yeah, of course you need it, but is it going to make a big impact? Sure, it may. Today, this could do. So I think it's fantastic that you have the platform and making time out to do this.
Thanks again, Sanjay.